Hello, Internet. Welcome to Making Money. My name's Eric, and this is your Daily Dollar, our financial segment where I give you one financial lesson every day to help you with your finances. So we've been talking about many things recently. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that gets harped on a lot, and it's something that I'm going to be bringing up more and more as we go through future lessons. And I've actually already talked about it a little, just kind of in passing. But it's also a topic that tends to have a lot more gray area than most people realize or most people discuss. So we're going to be going over what it is today and then get into some examples. So today's lesson, good debt versus bad debt. We're going to go over the distinction. We're going to give you some examples about it. I'm going to break it down. And then we're going to go over a little bit why it is more of a gray area than I think people really discuss. So first off, what is debt, right? If you are in debt, you probably, a lot of people are very intimately aware of debt. If you have debt, especially a lot of debt, this can be a really painful point, and can be, a suffocating feeling a lot of times when it comes to our finances. So what is debt? Debt simply is money that is owed. You owe it to someone for some reason, right? You are in debt. And there could be a variety of different reasons. When it comes down to it, it's basically a loan of some sort, and that might be oversimplifying it. But even when you talk about, mortgages and, buying a car and having to pay payments on your car, a car loan, it's a loan, right? A mortgage is a loan. Credit cards, you've borrowed money and now you've got to pay it back. It's all versions of loans. So this is money that is owed to someone else. And a lot of times when we talk about debt, we think of crushing debt, right? Debt can be something that really dries up your emergency fund. Debt can be something that puts you in a terrible financial space. But there are examples of good debt. To get to good debt, first let's wade our way through bad debt. Bad debt is something that I think more people are familiar with. And debt in general isn't something that we normally strive for out of pure, necessity. A lot of times we end up in debt, but more or less we try not to be in a lot of debt, obviously, as people. So when we talk about bad debt, the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is credit cards. Credit cards, in my opinion, are a great example of bad debt. There's many ways. We're going to go through, ways to get out of debt later on. Charge cards are a great example for a lot of people rather than, actual credit cards. We'll go into tons of stuff related to that stuff. Not going to really touch that too much right now. But yes, credit cards, they tend to have a high percentage, and you have... you tend to have to pay a high percentage on them. And it's a situation where you're in debt for something that you had borrowed a while back, and it can be really hard to get out of, because if you're in a position where you have to use your credit card a lot, chances are you don't have a lot of money left over, right? So now you're putting yourself in a situation where, okay, I'll get that money later. And then later comes in, by then you have more debt. And then it's like, well, I have to get, I'll get money later to pay out the current debt. and it snowballs. And snowball debt is really what destroys, a financial structure, right? That can really, again, can be suffocating. So yes, credit cards, bad debt. That's an expense for something that you would not otherwise had to have an expense for, right? You had to borrow money and now you have to pay it back with a very high interest rate. So high interest rates in general tend to be bad debt, and we'll break that down a little bit soon. Another one that people talk about a lot is car loans. All right. The reason why people take car loans as bad debt is that, and we'll get into the whole idea of assets versus liabilities, but when you buy a car, it continues to depreciate in value. There's a lot of, maintenance costs that go into a car. Cars tend to be a sink for money. So when we talk about, a car loan, especially something again that has a high interest rate, you're paying extra money for something that you already have to end up paying a lot on, and that depreciates in value over time. Now, this is when we start to get into the gray area of debt, because I am going to say something controversial in the fact that you could have a situation where a car loan could be good debt. That might be shocking to some people. Granted, that's probably a very small portion of the population. But if you were to buy, let's say, a sports car, right? Something that has been around for a while, it's very revered, something that holds its value very well, or potentially even something that can, appreciate in value, potentially, and let's say you were able to get, a lower interest rate on that, potentially that actually could be beneficial for you. Over time, that investment that you made into that car may actually end up either, coming out net zero or, resulting in a profit. So when we compare debts, right, when we're saying something is good or bad, we're really taking a look, okay, how do I end up at the end of the day? When everything's paid off, and I finally am at the end of the day with this, whatever I've, paid for, is it worth more than I put into it? Or is it worth close to what I put into it? And if it's not, if you've spent a lot more than it's worth, much like in credit card debt, especially high interest credit card debt, you're gonna be, it's gonna be bad debt, right? On the reverse side, if it ends up being very beneficial, yeah, I had to borrow some money, yeah, I had to be in debt for a little while, but I'm coming out ahead, that's good debt. And that's really the distinction here. So when we talk about car loans being, kind of potentially that gray area, I would say 9 out of 10, yeah, this is still going to be bad debt. There are still examples, though, where, you get a low interest rate. And the other thing is, too, let's say you use it for work, right? Maybe something that you can write off on your taxes. Whatever that situation is, you could leverage a car for other reasons. Now that takes us into personal loans. And again, this is kind of the gray area here. Personal loans, again, could be beneficial, but at the same time, if your interest rate's really high, if you're using it for something that, is not gonna, give you much back. If I took out a $10,000 personal loan and I went and had a really great weekend, just spent it all in one shot, and I walked away with nothing to show from that, that's bad debt. I had a great time. And some people may say, well, the experiences are worth more than that. Financially, not so much. Maybe to your soul. Maybe it's got a stronger profit to you as a person. But yes, so when we're talking about personal loans, now we're starting to get into that gray area there. It really depends on how you use it. This is true too when we're talking about margin trading. If we're talking about borrowing money to buy securities, that gets into a gray area, because now you're getting into something called leveraging. And when you leverage, especially when you again buy and sell securities, the upsides are higher, all right? You're basically borrowing money and then investing it. And then if that investment goes up, well, you've made money on the borrowed money. You still have the borrowed money. And if you've made more than the interest rate, you'll have made a profit on this exchange. However, if the money or the investment tanks, well, now you lost money and you still owe the money that you borrowed. So again, this gets a real gray area here. So this would, in my opinion, when we talk about margin trading, personal loans, this is the center of the gray area of good versus bad debt. We'll call it gray debt. And then we start to get into more of the things that most people consider to be good debt. A mortgage, for example, buy a house. Normally we consider this good debt. You're living in it, so you're getting a lot of use out of the investment. You could be renting it, in which case you might be getting profit off your investment. So a mortgage, again, especially a low interest rate, which mortgages tend to be, mortgages fluctuate most like, pretty much everything else. As we're filming this video right now, interest rates are pretty low, but prices are very high. So much like everything else, it's a balancing game. But mortgages, buying a house, especially if it is a house within your means and it's a low interest rate, yeah, that could be good debt for you. Eventually, you'd be able to sell it potentially at a higher price because over time, prices increase for the most part. And then finally, education. I mentioned before that I'm in my master's program. I have, student debt. Yes, it's not great. And of course, I'm aiming to pay off a lot of that sooner before I get out of college. And then afterwards, pay off my principal as quickly as possible. But if you are getting a master's or you're getting some sort of accreditation, some sort of education, and you're paying for that, that can be good debt because, yeah, you had to pay money for it, but it's going to better your situation later on. And again, we talked about how, investing in yourself is very important, but you do have to weigh the good versus the bad, right? Is this going to be worth it? Again, prices for a lot of education institutions right now are extremely high. Education in general is very expensive, at least in the US. And we have to really look at that more than ever when we're looking at going back to school or going to school. We have to really weigh, is it gonna be worth it? Should I go to an Ivy League, or does it make sense to not go to an Ivy League and I might still get just as good of a job, but I didn't have to pay X more, right? And that's just one example. But yes, so in general, education, mortgages are good. But just like anything else, if you get a high interest rate on something and it's, you're not going to get the full use out of it, or, it's going to be something that it's not going to pay itself forward in the future, then yeah, now we're talking about bad debt. So it might be a little premature to call any investment a good debt, any type of debt a good debt or bad debt. And debt in general does tend to skew bad, so you got to watch out for that. But anytime you get into a situation where you're borrowing, take a look at that. Don't just assume based on past knowledge of, oh, this is good debt and oh, this is bad debt. No, take a look at that situation and really analyze it. Is it good? Are you going to be, better off in the long run? Or can you forego this? Is this something we can put aside? All right. So I mentioned this because, yes, we are going to be getting into assets and liabilities going forward. We're going to be digging into all sorts of stuff, getting out of debt, investing, different types of, mortgages, loans, and stuff like that. So this is something that as you go through your financial journey, be aware when you have to take out a loan or you have to go into certain debts while you're investing in yourself or, bettering your situation. Be careful. But I think that's all I have to say on debt for today. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. If you are, feel free to like this video. If you're enjoying the series, feel free to subscribe. As always, you can hit me up on Twitter. I don't know why I have such a tough time saying Twitter these days. I keep wanting to say Twitch, but that's not right. Twitter. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. What do you guys feel about good and bad debt? Do you feel that there really is good and bad debt, or do you feel that it really is all gray, or that it tends bad? Love to hear from you guys. Feel free to leave those in the comments, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another awesome lesson. All right, guys. See ya.